Foro Fortaleciendo la Ciberseguridad para la Estabilidad del Sistema Financiero Mexicano. Y recibamos nuevamente con un fuerte aplauso al doctor Jaime González Aguadé, presidente de la Comisión Nacional Bancaria de Valores. Y al señor Earl, director general de Emergent Network Defense, con el diálogo de cierre Retos para México en materia de ciberseguridad. Adelante, por favor.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Lo voy a hacer en inglés. La vamos a tener una pequeña conversación para terminar la reunión. Entonces, thank you very much, Earl, for being here. Let me tell you that last week I was at IOSCO, which is an international organization of supervisors of financial markets. And one of the points that we were discussing there was precisely cyber security, cybercrime, which has been in the agenda of regulators, regardless of what many have mentioned here. We do take this thing seriously, and that's one of the points of having organized this forum, and we're very happy and thankful that you've been here. But also to mention that we also held, for the past 3 years, we've held a financial inclusion forum here at the same place we're at right now. And let me tell you that we've had like 50% more people attending this forum than the ones we've had regarding financial inclusion. And that is just to say that it is a very important issue around the world. But something, and this has to do with my first question, something that it's very different from the perspective, let's say, of the financial institutions and of the financial regulator to understand. First, because it's not a quantitative thing that you can measure, or not necessarily, and that you can put numbers and different regulations to more or less mitigate or to manage that risk, no, or not in a quantitative way. And second, the definition of cybersecurity, of cyber risk, is different from what we're used to in our line of work. So I would ask you, what do you think of that? What do you think? What's the definition? How we should look at that? What is the approach that we should have in that sense?
First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's been a great honor to be a part of this. I see this as a starting point of a long journey. And I want to say thank you to the audience as well. It's a long day, and everyone here has been attentive, and it is still full to the back of the room. So thank you. Also, I did get a copy of some of these questions you're going to ask about 10 minutes ago, so I had a chance to put together a few remarks, so I get to cheat a little bit, so thank you. So the definition of cybersecurity risk, and you're right, it is very difficult to quantify this. There is a lot of work ongoing on how we quantify, but that, as you pointed out, is not necessarily the solution. We may make progress on it, and that is a component of this, but this is an economics conversation. And the definition of risk, all risk, including cyber risk, is it's a trade-off between reward and loss. And so all businesses require risk-taking, and engaging in a digital economy, which I've heard so much about today, includes taking digital risks. So cyber risk is a component of your larger digital risk program, and it needs to be considered within your risk management function. So I'd suggest that there are 2 key points as we look at the definition of cyber risk and how to approach that. One is you will be attacked. And one of the things we like to say is that if you don't think you've been, well, first let me say you will be attacked, and you likely will be breached. And if you don't think you've ever been attacked, or if you don't think that you've ever been breached, you have been, you're not sophisticated enough to find it, and you need to go and look for it. And we call that we call that hunt teams. And so hunt teams are those in charge of identifying the adversaries in your networks that are already there that you just haven't been able to find. So that's the first component when we're looking at risk, is your job, when you know that you will be breached, when you know that you will be attacked, is to make that incident not impactful. Reduce the impact on that as much as possible so that your business, your ecosystem can continue moving forward. And that requires planning and strategy and everything that we've talked about today. The second is that you should take risk. None of this should be to scare you off. None of this should impede the progress of technology or impede the progress of digital services. But the key is to not take more risk beyond your tolerance level. So if you've not set those levels, if you're not measuring your cyber risk in real time, this is not an annual exercise, if you are not measuring it in real time, then you'll fail at both number one, making sure it's not impactful, and number two, at making sure you're not exceeding your risk tolerance level.
In that sense, I think there's a special role for the regulators, and not only trying to understand better what cybersecurity is, but also in the cooperation that we've talked, and it was a point in many of the panels that we have, that this is an issue that there has to be a lot of cooperation between authorities, between the industries. But how do you see the role of the regulator, of the authorities regarding cybersecurity, cybercrime?
So you're doing the right thing first now, which is the role of regulators is to enable that risk-taking and have that conversation, because if nobody starts the conversation, it doesn't happen. There were two great things that I heard today. I heard a lot of great things. But one is that the regulators are not there just to regulate, but they're there to collaborate. They're there to help regulated institutions to take those risks. And that means both events like this to have a conversation. That means training your examiners, training staff so that they know about cybersecurity and what risk-taking means and what those appropriate levels mean. It also means providing mechanisms and avenues for organizations to be able to operate, meaning that there are ways for them to report breaches, report weaknesses, be able to do so with protections that are in place to enable that open and collaborative cybersecurity environment. One of the things that I really liked hearing was the conversation around cybersecurity is not a competitive differentiator. It's a collaborative point, and all of us need to succeed in this together. I really appreciated that point. And another point that I really enjoyed was something that Charles said: we need to make sure regulators are worrying about tomorrow's problem, not yesterday's problem. Or I think he said next year's problem, not last year's problem. And so the issue is, how will you know what next year's problem will be? Because it won't be last year's problem, because that's the one that we've already dealt with. So we need to get better at prediction, better at identifying where the trends are going, where technology is going, where attackers are going, where vulnerabilities are going, so that we can get out in front of them. Everyone likes to throw the Wayne Gretzky quote in here, is, "I don't go to where the puck is, I go to where the puck is going to be." And I don't know how well hockey references translate down here, but it's I'm sure there's one for there in football as well. But go where the ball is going to be, not where it is. And so when it becomes easier to see where the attack is coming from before it hits you, then you can reduce that impact. Another way to think of this is like radar during World War II. Before we identified, this was invented by the British, late 1930s, and before we had radar, we had spotters out on the coasts looking for planes that were coming in. And the British invented radar to give them an early warning system that helped to save lives. Why can't we do that same thing here? Why can't we predict cyber attacks before they attack? Why can't we predict cyber attacks before they attack? And our biggest hurdle is that people don't think that this is possible, but they thought the same thing with radar as well. So people said the same thing about radar until it started saving lives. So I'd put out there that one of the roles of regulators and of government is to help provide insights in collaborating with technology firms and collaborating with regulated institutions to predict where you're likely going to have challenges next year. And the way we do this is through a strategic approach. It's not a reactionary approach. It's not about safeguarding the latest vulnerabilities against the latest vulnerabilities and threats, but about maturing the risk management processes at those regulated institutions. So the challenges of regulatory, and I've heard some of the challenges from the regulatory structure in Latin America, is that it is very diverse. It's very distributed. And so I'd suggest looking to some of the things that we think have been successful in the United States of voluntary standards like NIST, the NIST Critical Infrastructure Framework, and industry programs like PCI, the PCI program, and I've heard references to both of those today that have been great, but it requires leadership to step up, and progress will be just a little by little. One of the last comments I heard that I liked.
Thank you, Earl. And regarding some of the points you mentioned, as you know, this morning we signed some principles with many of the regulated industries associations that we have here in Mexico. Many of them are non-bank banks, and some of them are banks, the Banks Association, but most of them are deposit-taking associations or financial institutions. And I want just to mention and emphasize the point that you made, that it was made during the panels, that this is not a competition, it is a collaboration, and the only way to create the correct controls, to have correct defenses put in place, has to be through collaboration. And that's why we signed those principles, and that is why we initiated this forum, in order to understand better where we're going and what we wanted to do. And that is the basic fundamental of the principles that we signed this morning. And we sent those to you to see if you had any feedback. Actually, some of them was included, some of the comments you made. But after signing those here, I don't know if you have some comments regarding the principles and what we should be doing in the future, since we don't want to regulate the past. We want to take a forward-looking view on that.
I love this question. So this is a great start. This is exciting. I also love the recognition of the digitization of financial services right in the preamble. So this is a great starting point of a framework. And I'd suggest that the next step, which I know some of which is already in the works, is a comprehensive strategy to build and execute on these principles. So in the United States, we had a national strategy to secure cyberspace. And then we rewrote it, and then we had another one, and then we had an updated one. And then every time we have a new president, we have a commission that writes recommendations for that president of cybersecurity principles. And we engage with industry, we engage with regulators, we engage with the public to build that as a national conversation to try to map out what our strategy should be to help secure our digital ecosystem. I want to talk about the fifth principle. So I could stay up here, I'm sure everyone's ready to go. I could go through each one of those five, but I want to go to the fifth one. Because as much as I really enjoyed where it started on governance and strategy, I like where it's going next. And that's the future with education and culture. So some of the things that were talked about were the challenges of workforce and the lack of cybersecurity professionals, 2 to 3 million vacancies by 2020, and the importance of education and training. Start as early as possible. So much of what I did here today was talking about educating our more mature workforce. It was about educating and training those who were already members of the workforce. But look to the youth. Even in the last panel, the FinTech panel, I think key to that a lot is the youth are the banks, are the banking clients of the future. They are the bankers of the future. They are the citizens of the future. And the youth is the right place to start, and starting with those youth organizations. There is a mention that in the United States we have training programs and scholarships. It's called the Scholarship for Service, where the government will pay for a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree if you come and work for the government, if you fill those needed cybersecurity positions, if you go to one of the NSA-approved schools. And that's been in place for about 15 years now. You also, there was mention that you're working with 40 universities here in Mexico on cybersecurity talent. And I know a number of friends of mine. I got to have dinner last night with a friend of mine who I went to school with at Carnegie Mellon, who lives in Mexico City. This is an international issue. And come to our schools and build your cybersecurity programs in your schools so that we can build that cybersecurity workforce. But I want to highlight 2 key things that are really close to my heart. One is, this might throw you for a loop, but the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. And I looked it up, you have scouting in Mexico. In the United States, Both the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts have cybersecurity merit badges. They have cybersecurity totem chips. They have cybersecurity training for how the youth can be safe and secure online, how to stop cyberbullying and protect against online predators. And that relates to everything we're talking about today because it starts the conversation early. And it's not too early to start it. And kindergarten in first grade is a great time to start that conversation because your kids are getting phones and getting online early and earlier every time. So I don't know what's the youth organizations are doing in Mexico, but that's where government, industry, regulators, and I know the financial sector is such an advocate for engaging with the public and engaging with social issues, that's one key area. And so when we get past the youth and we get past the scholarships and training programs, I also want to mention professional credentialization. So I happen to be an incoming board member to ISC Squared. It's the credentialing body of the CISSP and other cybersecurity certifications. It's a global organization, and we have, I think, about 40,000, no, I think it's about 20,000 members through Latin America. And our next national congress will be held in South America. I think it's in Chile. So cybersecurity is a national issue, international issue. Get credentialed. Look at the credentialing organizations like the ISC Squared, like ISSA, that have these training programs and provide that element. And the starting point of that is driving that market demand, and that's where the strategy and the principles that you signed today are a good starting point for that. So I commend you for including that in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. And just to finish the forum, which, as you said, it has been a long day, I don't know if you want to make some final remarks or take some questions from the public. No sé si hay alguna pregunta del auditorio o dejamos que haga primero un comentario Earl para terminar ya la sesión, por favor.
En inglés, por favor.
¿Tenemos alguna pregunta de alguno de ustedes? No hay más preguntas. Sí.
Bueno, entonces nada más agradecer primero a todas las autoridades que nos acompañaron, principalmente a la Secretaría de Hacienda, al secretario Meade por haber participado con nosotros y habernos prestado el recinto para hacer este foro que me pareció pues, muy importante, muy relevante. Como mencionaba yo hace un momento, recibimos cerca de 700 invitados al día de hoy. Yo creo que eso pone de manifiesto la importancia que tiene, pues no solamente en el sector financiero, sino en el país y en el mundo, la importancia de la ciberseguridad. También agradecer evidentemente a todos los panelistas que nos acompañaron, como vieron, de todos lados del mundo. Agradecer en particular la presentación como keynote speaker de Earl el día de hoy y sus comentarios finales, y sobre todo agradecer la presencia de todos ustedes y el interés que tienen en este tema tan importante para el desarrollo de las finanzas y del país. Muchas gracias y hasta la próxima.
Muchísimas gracias al presidente de la Comisión Nacional Bancaria de Valores, el doctor Jaime González Aguadé, y al señor Earl Crane, director general de Emergent Network Defense, por esta charla. Y con esta actividad damos por concluido este día de actividades del foro Fortaleciendo la Ciberseguridad para la Estabilidad del Sistema Financiero Mexicano. A todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias por su asistencia y que tengan una muy buena tarde.